And so let me move to the other side. So the first thing I did after going through those footages in one of the coaching sessions was to show him the 5 views of personal effectiveness. And I got him to look as if it was a compass. So how do you manage up? How do you manage to your shareholders, to your investors? How do you manage to those who report directly to you? How do you manage to the organization? And then how do you manage to the outside world? And he found that very useful, almost profound. But I then said to him, so how do they work with you to make you more effective? Now he started to see the complexity, the whole point of recognition, that it's a two-way street. And was he working to get information from those people? So suddenly, he began to have a tool which we called the compass. And he used to have at least once a week a little reflective period on his own with that on a piece of paper and just say, what really happened this week? How did I use that? How did it work? How didn't it work? What could I do? And that's what led us to this recognition connection grid. Very often I come across businesses where leaders are talking about vision and passion. But then people like myself as a coach get involved because it's not working. Yet they say, I have vision. I have real passion for what I'm doing. The thing that invariably is missing is the inspiration. And it's fascinating. When I ask leaders, who inspires you? Many of them don't have a very long list. Normally Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, those will be 2 people who are normally mentioned. But outside of that, not many. Maybe if they support a football team, they might have someone. But seriously, there's very few. But without that inspiration, as a leader, and to Catherine's point in her presentation, how can that relationship really begin to develop? So without the inspiration and relationship, where's the team climate going to be? It's going to be down here. The heads are going to be down. Similarly, with values and beliefs. You hear those 2 words an awful lot. But actually, if you ask them how they're influencing what's going on, you normally get a telephone ringing, and you get a look of, but that would be a bit risky, because I'm not in control. Well, in this case with my client, we went back to the metaphors we'd used, the videos, and he realized he needed to let go. He needed to use that influence. And therefore, he could give, if you like, permission for people to take risks. So there was a tolerance framework put in place so that people knew they could make mistakes. It wasn't going to be the end. Sorry? So, risk. One of the other tools that I use, and I did not use with this particular client, was a thing called the risk type compass. And it's 8 elements. There's 8 different types. We don't, as to Darren's point, we don't just fit into one, and this isn't the be-all and end-all. But what it was a very, very useful conduit and became a catalyst to look at what are the type of people I've got around me? What sort of risk profile have they got? What propensity for risk? So if I just give you a few seconds just to read through that and maybe think with the people that you deal with, which one of those risk types might they be? Typically, the bottom left, the prudent, is what you would expect to see in finance, for example. But the other interesting thing is how we as leaders, and we therefore as coaches, how we influence people into different boxes. So without wanting to be provocative or unduly challenging to all of you, if you're in a situation where you're coaching and you need to step outside of your comfort zone, and you were sitting in a prudent or a wary, that's actually your basic profile. Are you really going to do it? What preparation have you put in place to be able to step out into the uncomfort zone? Because your client needs you to do that. So that brings another challenge for coaches as well as for clients. So, very briefly, what helps us to take risks? I'm going to give you a list. It's not the most comprehensive, but I think it covers a lot. We need to have confidence in our own ability. That's why earlier when I stood up just before lunch and talked about successes, it's very important to know and understand and celebrate internally our own successes. That wet race, I have a particular anchor I use before I get into the car to remind me I can do this, I know it's risky, but I'm going to take the rein on. Capability to explore the unknown, the point I've just made about risk. What risk profile do we have? Acceptance of consequence, a big one, a really big one. And willingness to learn from mistakes. We can't learn if we don't make mistakes because we are not perfect. So that's why I mentioned the tolerance framework. If people begin to understand that they can make mistakes and it's not the end of the world. You know, for me in my car, I had a big crash. I really thought the mechanics were not going to be very pleased with me. It was a really stupid mistake. And all they did was put their arm around me and said, "You're not going to do it again. Let's get the car patched up," and we went out and raced. That meant an immense amount to me, and I felt almost a duty when I went back out to make sure that we came back with a result. So from that, I drew inspiration from their response. Other areas that can affect us, the trends, others are doing it. When you think about certain situations that you might have done, if you're standing in isolation, you might not do it. But if everybody else is there, perhaps you would try a bungee cord. Personally, I'd never try one. But some people will see 3 of their friends do it when they're down in New Zealand on holiday. I'll have a go too. Tolerance of failure, I've just spoken of that. Supportive environment, I think I've just touched on that one. And our attitude towards risk. And I think that is really quite a significant one, certainly as a coach. You know, when we go into the room to help somebody else, but we should be mindful of our own profile and how that works, and how we can therefore influence them. Finally, purpose and engagement. And you can have those two, I would argue. But if you haven't got the energy, if the team spirit is not there, again, it is not going to happen. The results will not be there. So that means that it doesn't matter how much energy one puts into writing an email, it will not have the same effect as going up and saying, "Hi, Catherine, I've got an issue," and actually dealing with it. But again, how often, certainly in coaching, do we find with leaders, they'll be talking about something. If we just ask the question, how have you communicated that? You'll probably find, oh, it's an email, or I've had so-and-so talk to so-and-so. So with that, we also looked at team interdependence. And 3 of the questions that I asked this client, as generic questions, I said, how do leaders help people in the organization? And when he sat and thought about that, he realized that he didn't actually go out a lot and help others in the organization because he was having his people do it. So he was kind of doing it by remote control. And then how do those in the organization help leaders? Now, someone this morning mentioned a leader pausing and a baby, how it will look. That was exactly how my client was. It was suddenly he realized that people do not feel encouraged to come and help him. They think he is impregnable. He's self-sufficient. He's resilient. He can do it. But actually, he can't. He knows he can't. Which led to the 3rd question. How do leaders help themselves? Now, in this particular case, as I said, this leader really started working on coaching himself. He created a reflective moment every week. And every day, he had a list of about 10 points that he used to read every morning before he started work. I never asked him to do that. I never even suggested it to him. But he realized he needed to gain some form of way of reminding himself what was going to happen. Because change does not happen quickly for most of us. So, just looking at that grid a different way. So instead of looking horizontally, we started to look vertically. So we have the vision and we have the values. Do we really have the purpose? Is it really coming alive? And that's when he realized that from a leadership point of view, he really needed to have direction focus, to check that people were going in broadly the right direction. With passion and beliefs, did he really have engagement? Were people really engaged, or were they giving him lip service? He needed that connection focus. So to my point on emails, he now started going out much more and just stopping people in the corridors and talking to them and finding out what was going on. So he became real. He connected with them. With that combination of 6, he really began to realize how he could be inspirational. But more importantly, how others could be inspirational to him. They might not always know that, but they could. And so he began to see inspiration as a reciprocal thing rather than just something that a leader had to do. Through that, he began to realize how influence was really happening. The result of that, people were prepared to take risks. The organization did take risks. Things really did begin to happen. Bearing in mind that this particular business was changing very rapidly. So, what he could find there was a real motivation focus. He could really get that sense that people were now really up for it. So in conclusion, to get to the total whole performance, although we talked about relationship, risk and results, he really began to see some very fundamental building blocks, which I hope that yourselves have begun to see from so many of the wise words spoken this morning, that through this case study, this is perhaps an example, dare I say, of how all of that can begin to really work. So really addressing yourselves, integration and developing greater recognition. How can we do that? Well, I think firstly, if you're in HR, begin to think about what is the team climate? Is the support network really working? How do I judge it? How do I measure it? How do I monitor it? The team spirit. I've been out and about. I can really begin to feel that something is happening. And then for the leadership, direction, connection, motivation. Do I really know what those are? Am I actually out there testing them? Because if they are, then I'd suggest those 3 things will start to happen. So finally, I'd leave you with the thought that recognition is more than a reward. It's a valuable currency. So it isn't just about being recognized in terms of someone saying, well done, or you get a pay rise. It's much, much more than that. But recognition is very key. Thank you very much.